mij nog uit, staat er dan nog eens een keer een titel van de presentatie?
Nee.
Nee, oké.
Hij moet even wat het scherm wel het.
Ja, sorry hoor. Starten? Oké. I'll wait for everyone to come in. All right. Hello, everyone. As you might know, giving a presentation is somewhat stressful. So what we are going to try to do is increase your stress level so it kind of matches ours. You might have heard one of your clients say something like this. Can you just not make the search more like what Google does? And oh, by the way, our go live is in 3 days. Okay, I'll give the screen a second to reconnect. Okay, our go live is in 3 days. Oh, and we've also run out of budget. Or maybe make it more like Amazon. Maybe you've heard something like that. Maybe you can feel the stress already building and you feel a little bit overwhelmed. So Steven and I are going to try to lower that stress.
Yeah, I'm Steven. I'm the head of Drupal at Calibrate. I like to describe myself as enthusiast and passionate in anything I do. I've been doing Drupal since 2009 now. It's a long time. I had great fun doing it. I met a lot of interesting people. If anyone wants to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn.
My name is Joris. I also work for Calibrate as a Drupal developer, but I also do some custom development in Laravel at Kodana.
If you heard those questions, you might get stressed and think of technological answers to the problems. You'll be thinking about named entity recognition, maybe some BERT or distal BERT for vector-based search. Or you might figure out a way to do nearest neighbor searching and how to get all the data that you want, just like Google does it. But the goal of the session is to convince you that it's not always important, or not always as important to take a technological approach, but using creativity, you can also get great results. So this is a demo of what we'll be showing you today. So the way search is typically set up, it dates back from the 60s and it's keyword frequency based. So that means we're looking for how many times your keyword occurs in a certain document. But that's not always the most logical way to find something. It's good for searching something. If you have a library and you want to find a specific book, then you want to know which book contains a word or something. But for getting an answer to your questions or finding an address or openings hours for a company, that's not always the greatest way. So what is important is that there's always an intent. Somebody is not just searching something, they're looking for something, mostly for an answer, or they want to be inspired. There's always an intent the user has. So you need to focus on the intent to give them the user experience that they deserve and that they need. And Google does that pretty good. So this is a typical Google search result, and at the top you can see it's just a keyword-based search, this one. Then at the bottom below there are stories, because people might be looking for stories about SpaceX, not just the address information. And then there's also a structured knowledge graph at the side, because Google knows that SpaceX is a company and it can provide relevant information about it. FAQs, that's some kind of unstructured data or semi-structured data that Google uses to help people get along further. Because if you have a question and it's there, you don't even have to go away from Google. You can stay there on the same page and get your answer. Videos, it's another type of document that's being searched, and they are grouped together to have a more inspirational view. And then the real search words begin, so they are more at the bottom. Google tries to give you a good experience first, tries to give you what you are looking for, and then it falls back to more keyword-based searching. And here, even below, are still some images which might be useful. And it's almost at the bottom that Google says what the related searches are, and gives you keywords. And that's something I find very interesting, because the searches I've built, I always put them at the top, because I'm not as confident as Google is that you will have found your answer by now. So how are you going to set up a good search experience? Well, first of all, you need to have good search results. That's the most important ones. And then you have to focus on the experience itself and how you get people to find the stuff they're looking for and what the meaning is of what you want to show.
So good search results are not as easy to do, but there are a couple of modules in Drupal that help. You've got Search API, you've got Solr, you've got Search API Solr, Elasticsearch, like in the session earlier today. And what is important is that you configure everything correctly. So in Search API, you've got three main entities. You've got a server, an index, and a view. A view is typically something like a view. It's the Search API display. And then you've got an index, which configures what data will be shown in the view built on that index. And then a server, which configures what backend the data is stored in and what backend is used to query that. So the server can be database, can be Solr, can be Elasticsearch. And what is important here is that it is really easy to configure, and that you can always start by using a database backend. You don't have to use a Solr backend from the start. You can configure it with database and move to something else later. The move should be relatively easy to do. So the difference between a database backend and a Solr backend for Solr's purpose, for Search API's purposes, aren't that big, but you have to take some other things into account. For example, the database backend is usually much easier for your operations team because they know how to scale and configure MySQL. They do that every day. They might not have as much experience with Solr or any Java-based application. It's probably sufficient feature-wise, but on the other hand, there is a lot more stress on your one MySQL backend, and also all the stemming that you have to do and all the filtering that you have to do it in PHP before the node gets sent to your backend, and that might mean even more stress on your PHP as well. So that's why Solr is easier to scale, because you have a separate server or a separate container which offloads a lot of work from both PHP and MySQL. It's also needed if you want to do some AI or machine learning or vector-based stuff, and also for geo searches, searching on distance between several entities, for example. That's only possible with Solr or Elastic. On the other hand, it's more software to maintain. It's a different software stack. It might be harder on your operations team. So your index, it lists all the types of entities that will be sent from your Drupal to the database backend or to the Solr backend. What's important here is the index items immediately. It's not the best for performance, because your editor will have to wait for the document to be sent to the search backend. On the other hand, your editors might find it weird if it takes 10 minutes for the document to be from being edited to be actually found in your search. So that's something that you have to talk about with your editing teams. And then about fields, what's the approach that I recommend is to use a rendered entity for, or your rendered HTML output for all the things that are being searched on. So all the content should be in there. And all the fields that have different settings, be it a title that you have give more weight, or a field that is an integer that you want to facet on or that you want to sort on, those should be done independently. But you don't want to have to configure all the different fields for all the content types. Here, you do it with rendered HTML instead. So I already mentioned a couple of other modules. One of them is Search API Autocomplete, which can also do live suggestions, which is kind of a different thing. Steve will explain a little bit more about that later. And then there's Search API Sorts, which is a module that allows you to have one of those fields that you've configured that are of the scalar types, so strings, integers, floats, easy types, not full text. And you can just add a sort on that, and it exposes a block to your Drupal. And then there's facets, which is not really the key thing that we're going to talk about here today. But those also use those same fields with the scalar types, so with the easy types. But all of that is just a basis that you build on to provide the experience to your users. So it's not the end goal. The end goal is that your users find what they are looking for. And some of the things that we've shown in the demo earlier, we are going to show you a little bit more about how we built that.
First of all, we started off with the search box itself, and instead of searching immediately, we also provide some guidance to people. You can look at Google Analytics to see what people are looking for, and if you see that people tend to look for the same questions every time, it's probably smart to put them right within the search box. It's even better if you've managed to restructure your site so that they can find it without having to search, but a quick win can be to just create a search suggestion menu that you can use to provide some helpful links for people that are starting to search. A menu is the most simple approach. You can also store your search terms in the database and then show them to the people so that's a real-time, most searched block. The downside of doing it on a real-time is that people start looking for complaints or bad questions, and these will pop up there, and it's better to have it more in a way that editors and people can have control over what the menu items are. Another thing we did for a customer is the autocomplete. You can use suggestions for keywords, but you can also show live results. And for the live results, you can configure any view mode, and then it also looks nice. So for this website, if you start typing chicken ball, does it really say chicken ball? Yeah, it does. You can start searching for chicken ball, and then it will show you chicken balls. And the data itself here, it's coming from Search API DB, but it's the content, the products are in an external system. So we've used the data source to get the data in the database, but it's not really living in Drupal. It's just the index that gets populated. Now, when it comes to your search snippets, that's where it's important that you think of what the intent of a user can be and what you can use from the data that you have so that you can structure it. That's the good part about Drupal. Every piece of content, every node, every content type is structured. Google needs to make a guess if it's a blog post or an event, but we already know that. So inside the search snippet, we can have fields that are content type specific, and you can add the teaser text, images, text, the search excerpt, and that's something that I see on a lot of searches is people just show the teaser and the search excerpt, but that's not the best user-friendly approach. You have to make sure that people immediately know where your search item is located within your site so that they know if they click it, they will be where they want to be. You can go pretty far. You can also add the price if you're looking for products, or even add a call to action immediately, so that people don't have to click through, but they can go to your event registration form if they want. What's also great to do is to group data. If you're thinking about what your customers are searching for on your website, it might be a good idea to get bits and pieces together, like Google does it. So in this example, we've set up all the FAQ items to be on top, and then there's images below. In the search snippet, these are two examples. We have one for a location which shows an image, the teaser text, and then the search snippet, which is populated through Search API to show the context of the keyword inside the text. And there's the Frogstar World B example, which is a landing page, and there isn't that much structured information to show, so we use the breadcrumbs so that people immediately know where within the site that it's structured. Another thing we do is we also add media items to Search API. That means that we can search for images and group them. So what we allow people to do is we allow them to add keywords to images that are only used for search. I'll be talking about media library enhancement tomorrow. That's where this will pop up as well. But because we tag content and media items with keywords, anyone can also find images if that's useful for your project. And if you take it really far, you can even tie that to Google Vision API, and if the Google AI automatically figure out what's inside your picture and what should be shown. And then there's this one specific knowledge graph at the site. This is a location content type, so we know it has an address and some geo information. And there's openings hours that we want to put up front, because a lot of times if people are looking for something, they're looking for opening hours. And the way we built it is it's a search attachment. So this is just the same view as we are using for searching on, and because this is an attachment, Views already knows what all the contextual filters and all the export filters are. So this attachment has the same filters that the view itself is using for searching. And then we've structured it that it only shows the two content types that have a specific meaning for us. So if you retrieve a location, then we can show the location with its structured data, and the same for an event. We decided to only show one knowledge graph at the site, so it doesn't really matter if it's the 5th or the 6th search result. The first one within the filter will show up on the site. And then we've set it up so that we have a specific search attachment view mode that we can use. So every content type can be structured using view modes, and then you can configure exactly how you want it to look in the knowledge graph. Views attachments can't be rendered as a block out of the box, though there's one specific custom block plugin we had to add to render the search attachment, but it's just 5 lines of code and anybody should be able to do that. I also said we listed the FAQ items at the top, but if you go looking at whether or not Virgin Galactica is a good investment, then you can see that the keyword space isn't even in there. So we actually managed to find a FAQ item that does not contain the keyword. That's what Google does using neighbor search, but the way we've set it up is we're taking content, and this is actually a facet. So this search snippet is actually the same as this one. You can't read the yellow. I should have chosen another color. But it's just a facet. In the backend, people can tag content with related FAQ items. So every node that's in the system is tagged with relevant FAQs. We don't show them anywhere, but they exist for search purposes. And then we have set facets to show 5 items. So if you have 500 search results, we use facets and we sort it on the count. So that means that the 5 most found FAQ items within the entire search will be shown at the top as an FAQ. We set it up to use a view mode accordion item so that it can pop up like an FAQ item does. And then we had to add one little specific piece of code to make it a raw result, because otherwise Facet will try to make it a link so that you can actually filter on it, and we didn't want that in this behavior. So Facet's view mode is a module that allows you to select the view mode you want to show a facet in. It can be useful for faceting on terms as well, but we use it in FAQ matter. And this is the code snippet that we used to generate the facets as a raw result. It's pretty simple. It just extends the array widget, which is already used if you want to use facets in a REST context. And all we had to do is generate the values in a raw result.
So I hope that the stress I gave you at the start has subsided a little bit. It's when your customer asks you to make the search more like Google, you can say, yes, we can make it more like Google. We can also reach your go live that's within 3 days. We don't have to use a lot of budget, but if you've completed it out, of course, it's impossible. And we can also make it more like Amazon or anything else. So what we wanted to show here is that the technical solution for building something more like Google is not possible, but with some creative thinking and some nice configuration of your Drupal site, you can reach something that is kind of close. So we want to also thank the sponsors, both the Platinum sponsors and also the other. You can reach us on Slack for any of the other channels. And are there any questions?
Yep. Any questions? We're supposed to throw this at you, but hello? I think the battery died. If anyone has a question, I'll repeat it so that the recording gets it, and then I'll answer. So when do you switch from DB backend to a Solar backend when you're not started from Solar from the start? For pretty much 90% of our customers, we start with the database backend at first, because feature-wise it's mostly sufficient. And then sometimes we notice that when there gets more data in the system, or there gets to be more traffic, that it slows everything down for searching. And that is the moment when we say, oh, we might have to switch to a better performing Solar backend or search DB. Another reason for doing that, if we start, the focus on the search is more at the against the go live of the project. So mostly after a month or two, people tend to notice that people are searching and aren't really finding what they are looking for, that it can be better. And that's when we say, yeah, we might have to add fuzzy search, or we want to build a did you mean functionality, which isn't budgeted from the start. So that's when we do a shift to Solar.
So what's okay? This is great. So you also switch from database backend to a Solar backend. It's not very often needed. The Drupal.org issue queue search used to be on database, and I think it still is, but at least for the first 10 to 15 years of it being on Drupal 7, so maybe not that long because Drupal 7 isn't that old, but for a couple of years it was Search API with the database backend. So I'm assuming most of us build sites that have fewer nodes than Drupal.org issue queues. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so nodes or index size is not the way or the breaking point in where you have to go. It's purely on performance. And it's also often that you have a site with a lot of pages that aren't cached or not able to be cached, and then you have a lot of MySQL processes running already. And in that case, it's easier, instead of going from like one MySQL to a clustered MySQL, that's not as easy as just adding a Solr instead. So that's also one way. Yes, exactly. Yeah, more like this, proximity-based search, those things are not available in a database backend. They could possibly be done with really ugly queries and really ugly, sometimes in MySQL 8, but some other things can be done with PHP. But what's really important is that if you can make it so that any transformation on your data happens before the data comes into the index, that's always a big win, because then your customers searching don't have to do any data transformation, don't have to do any kind of thinking before it gets sent to a backend. And that's also one reason why stemming, for example, is possible on a database backend, but it means that your keyword has to be stemmed in PHP before it gets sent to the database backend, which decreases performance because it's done in PHP. It's not as fast as the native Solr implementation. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, it isn't a knowledge graph. It's just piece of structured data that appears on the right side. But we noticed that a lot of people searching for our customers are looking for office hours or are looking for a specific geolocation or a specific event, and then we can show them immediately. So it's the experience, which is pretty much the same, but it isn't a real knowledge graph like Google. It's without breaking the bank. Anyone else?
Okay, in that case, we went a lot quicker than expected. Thank you very much, and have fun at the next